All right. I'm going to get all serious. My name is Marie Murrell. I am a PolitiChick, PolitiChicks.tv. My co-hosts are actress Morgan Brittany, Dr. Gina Loudon, and me. We have 50 writers across the United States that are wonderful political activists in their hometowns. And right now, I have to say, I am so jacked up on jelly beans. If I talk too fast, I'm not. I love them. I was over there where you get the free samples. I wanted to just open my mouth and just, walk along the whole line. They're wonderful. I want to give you a little overview of who I am, just so you know, and then we'll get started. I believe the Democrats created the rule that you're never supposed to talk about religion and politics in public. And the reason I believe that is because we as Republicans follow rules, and we stopped talking about religion and politics in public, but they didn't. They talked more and more and louder, and we became the silent majority. I think that was a mistake. It sounded good, but it didn't really work for us. So now the world only hears one side of the story. And we in the new media, PolitiChicks, Breitbart, different websites, Fox News, we're trying to get our word out there too. And so because of this, I'm declaring publicly, and I hope everyone will do the same, that I am an unapologetic, right-wing, Christian, conservative Republican, white woman. I'm a woman. There's no war on me. I believe in lower taxes, smaller government, and a very strong free market system. I believe in God. I believe in the American flag. I believe in the Constitution of the United States of America without question or pause. I believe climate change is weather. And unlike the other side, I do not judge a man by the color of his skin or the amount of money he has in his wallet, whether it's having too much money or not enough money. I don't care. It's the man's character that I care about. And I believe that is what the Republican Party is all about. So because I believe these things so strongly, I refuse to be a silent majority ever again. And it's time for all of us to make some noise. Don't you think? All right. Well, that may not have been the best thing to say right before a prayer. We have to be quiet for just a few minutes, but I'm not kidding. I really, if I start talking too fast, please watch, make sure I'm not eating any more jelly beans, because I've got a stash over here, and it will happen. Pastor Ed Conley I'm sorry? Deacon. I am so sorry. Deacon Ed Conley of Missionary Baptist Church of Vallejo, correct? Vallejo. Thank you so much, Deacon. You want to hold it, or?
Give her no more jelly beans. Give her some water. All right, good and body head, please. Most gracious Father, we come before to give you thanks, Father. We thank you for the opportunity to enjoy this meal, but more importantly, to enjoy the company. We ask you, Father, look down upon each one of us, and let each one of us understand that we are all human beings, that we all need to understand one another, whether you're white, black, purple, or green. We all have a history. We all have myths that we need to get rid of. But Father, we ask you to look down upon us, Open our minds and our hearts to the many blessings you have given each of us each day. We thank you for this meal again through your Son, Christ Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
All right, and now we're going to have the presentation of the colors by the Public Safety Academy. And the Pledge of Allegiance by United States Marine Corps Gunnery Sergeant Retired Lloyd Dasher.
Hoorah! I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, and Mr. Don Preston, the chairman.
Welcome, everybody. It's so nice to see returning faces and all the new faces. Welcome to the Liberty Ball. Why the theme Liberty? Theme Liberty is because it's about citizens and our freedom and our Constitution and our rights. We've seen large companies unable to be able to operate in this county. Copart left, one of the largest used auto parts companies in the United States, maybe worldwide. They went to Texas. We saw MV Transportation leave. They went to Tennessee. I'm in real estate. I see a lot of folks with tears in their eyes losing houses. I do everything I can to help them. But the real reason is they're laid off from jobs. We need to revive the economy. Our mission in this Solano County Republican Central Committee is to stay focused on our citizens, stay focused on jobs, make sure they have food on the table, money in their pocket, so we can all exchange commerce, grow, and prosper. I think, Anne-Marie, you said it all, so I don't need to say any more. I hope you have a wonderful time. I need to tell you, Chef James Aptakin, who is preparing this lovely meal we're going to have today, scrumptious, flew out here last night from Australia, an assignment in Australia, to be here with us. And he also made another trip out here about 2 weeks ago to make sure everything was right. So I hope you enjoy this meal. I hope you understand that what we're doing here, the money we're raising here, the auction items that are out there, all this is so we can start now working for the 2014 election. We can't wait until next March. We can't wait until next June. I ask you all to join us and come and work with us, and I hope you have a wonderful time. Thank you for being here.
Hey Vacaville, I'm here with Mr. Don Preston. How are you doing today?
Bruce, fine. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well. Of course, once again, we got invited to the third annual Republican Convention Ball here in Sassoon, California at the Jelly Belly Factory. I'm here with Mr. Don Preston. And Mr. Don, what are we doing here today?
Well, the theme of this event is the Liberty Ball. And what it's really all about is to free up our economy so business will come back. It's all about jobs. It's all about putting meals and putting food on people's table and making sure that people have enough to live. We've lost Copar to Texas. We've lost MV Transportation to Tennessee, and we don't want to lose any more business. So we need to make Solano County a county that is very, very desirable for business.
Now that's a perfect answer if I've ever heard one. So once again, Mr. Don Preston, for those of my viewers, because we're in Solano County, but now that we're with AT&T Uverse Channel 99, of course we're Vacaville Public Access Channel 27, we're in Solano County, we're in Sacramento County, we're in Calaveras County. Can you give all of those counties just why we need this Liberty Ball and why the government needs to pay attention to what we're talking about here tonight at the convention?
Well, we need this Liberty Ball because this is about what our country's principles are about. This is why we were founded. We want to reflect on the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and all that says we should have the freedom to live our lives. We're getting more and more regulated. We're getting more and more taxes to the point that a lot of our folks in our county are having difficulty putting food on the table. We need to fix that. We need to encourage trade. We want businesses to come back to California and especially to Solano County. That will put our economy in check, and it will make sure that our citizens are well taken care of.
That sounds perfect to me. So once again, Mr. Don Preston, anybody that's a friend of Solano County is a friend of Vacaville Public Access Televisions.
Thank you.
Thank you for the interview. We're at the third annual Liberty Ball here in Sassoon, California's Jelly Belly Factory. Once again, you can catch us. We're going to be here next year also, as many years as they continue to have this event. Vacaville Public Access Television will be there. Mr. Don Preston will be here. I want to give a special thank you to Chris Turner for inviting us out once again. And Chris Turner, Mr. Don Preston, I want to thank the Vacaville Public Access team that's out here. I want to give a special thanks to Dave Edwards, Tammy Edwards. I'm not where she's at, but Alicia's running around here somewhere. The whole Vacaville Public Access family.
One other person, Jim McCulley, my first vice chairman, has done an outstanding job putting this event together today. And so I'm very grateful to him and all the work he and the rest of our team have done.
Thank you very much.
Our first speaker tonight is an important man, just like all our young Republicans. Dan Logue, Assemblyman Dan Logue. He is an
in economic development, leading Republican efforts to improve California's business climate, fighting for jobs retention, reducing regulatory burdens, and working towards economic recovery for the Golden State. The National Federation of Independent Business has awarded Logue a perfect score based on his voting record and support of small business. His widespread efforts have also drawn the attention of media outlets across the nation, including the New York Times, Fox News, and the LA Times. Dan and his wife Peggy reside in Marysville with their dog, Buddy, and the really important thing about Dan Logue, he is running against John Garamendi. Yeah. So he's going to really need our support here in California. Assemblyman Dan Logue.
Very good. Thank you very much. I'm so excited to be here today. Remember when President Lincoln wrote the Gettysburg Address, it was a rebirth of freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, that rebirth for our country starts tonight, doesn't it? Yes. We're going to take our country back. I'm proud to be here today. I'm Chief Minority Whip in the Assembly. We've been fighting for jobs in California for 4 years. And ladies and gentlemen, 2 years ago, well, actually 3 years ago, when I was first sworn in, the first thing that I did as an assemblyman is I took 10, 12, 13 legislators to the state of Nevada. Now, why would I do that? You're probably saying, why is he going to Nevada? It was real simple, because the big media in Sacramento wants you to believe that California is the worst place to do business in the country because of the recession. And I wanted to make a point that it's our policy that has collapsed the economy in California. And that's why we went to Nevada and met with businesses that left this state, closed their doors the very day that we showed up there, and the words that they said to us was doing business in California was the death of 1,000 cuts. They didn't come here to help us, they came here to hurt us. They didn't want to build us up, they wanted to fine us. And they finally drove us out of the state of California. I talked to a gentleman who has a tomato processing plant just 2 days ago. And he met with CARB, the Air Resource Board. And you will not believe what they told him. In order to cook their paste, they have to use CO2, right? And they looked at him and they said, John, why don't you just move your businesses out of California? That's what they told him. And then he said, well, we can't do that because California's industry is farming. And they said, ladies and gentlemen, this is what they said. They said, it's okay because California is going to lose its farming economy because China's going to take that over too. So you might as well close your doors. That's the exact words that they said in Sacramento. Well, I'm here to tell you that what we've got to do as a party, ladies and gentlemen, is how many times, and this is real frustrating for me because I met with Herm in his office, and I was like I was having a revival meeting when I looked at all the pictures of Ronald Reagan. And you know what? Why is it that nobody talks about the Reagan era anymore? Why? Because the left doesn't want you to remind them of how great it was. They don't want you to know that this is the party of Reagan, and they're trying to keep that from our young children, from the people, the blue-collar workers, and all these people that were brought under the umbrella of that economic growth and a bright future. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the Democratic Party's philosophy is entitlements now, slavery later. That's their philosophy. But for the Republican Party, it's the economy. Grow the economy. And that should be the one message that we own throughout this country. So I did a little research to find out if I'm right. And I did some background check, and I realized that there's 2 presidents since World War II that had unemployment that was higher than 10%. Guess who they were? Ronald Reagan and Barack Obama when he took office. So I looked at the comparison between the 2 philosophies of growing the economy or growing government. And it was an amazing comparison on who was right and what worked. And I'll give you some statistics. After 4 years under President Reagan, the median household income rose by 8%. Under Barack Obama, it fell 5% after 4 years. Unemployment rate reached, after 55 months of the recession in 1981, Reagan's recovery for jobs is 8 million new jobs. Barack Obama lost 4 million new jobs. Look at the comparison. After 55 months in office, during the recession, food stamps under Reagan had fell 13%. Under Barack Obama, food stamps rose 71%. And we have more people on subsidies for food now than are working in America today. This is a tale of two countries, literally. A nation of growing the economy and a nation of growing government. And look at the comparison. And the reason I'm bringing this up is, ladies and gentlemen, guess what? We're right. We won. What we did with Reagan worked. So we need to go back out there and explain this to the people of California and this country, that by turning people loose, we'll raise this country up again. The number of beneficiaries under Reagan had declined 1%. Under Barack Obama, welfare increased 12%. The number of Americans drawing unemployment insurance under Reagan dropped by 12 points. Under Barack Obama, it rose by 19 percentage points. The tale of two cities. The future of our party, we've got to work together. And there's a plea that I'd like to make to them tonight, that if we're going to survive as a party, we've got to reach out and stand on our principles and win people over. And now's the time to do that. We have the opportunity of a lifetime. Now, many of you were discouraged after 2012, right? But remember, I'm 62 years old. My father was a delegate to the Goldwater Convention. I remember how bad we took it then. And then Nixon was impeached, and they thought it was the death of the Republican Party. And then what happened? Ronald Reagan. This is our moment. Ladies and gentlemen, 2014 is the year of destiny for our country. And it's in your hands. You are going to own this. And I'll tell you why. As Vice Chairman of Health in California, dealing with Obamacare, trying to kill it in California, you have to understand that everything Barack Obama will do between now and 2014 is take back Congress. And if he gets 2 more years of Congress, this country's going to be in big trouble. The war is on. In 2014 in California, if we don't carry and get back to 2/3, we will be cemented for 10 years of having a supermajority by the Democrats in Sacramento. We have been successful, and Senator Nielsen and myself, Jim, are you here? Right here. Say hi to Jim. Give him a big ovation. We have been fighting the fight. 2 years ago we stopped, and Tim Donnelly, stand up, Tim. Tim Donnelly, a colleague of mine. 2 years ago, we stopped $60 billion in new taxes. The governor walked in and looked at us and said, well, I only needed 2 votes. And he says, I'm going to peel off 2 votes. And as Chief Minority Whip, we worked together as a team. And after 9 months, the governor caught me in the basement and said, I don't know what happened, but we can't peel you off, can we? I said, no. The people of California want to grow the economy, take back their state. And Governor, by the way, I've been here a year and a half with you, and you've never mentioned the word jobs one time. It isn't going to work. So what I did is I took 10 legislators to the state of Texas, and Gavin Newsom went with us. And we met with Governor Perry. And we walked into the Capitol, and the Associated Press was there, and the Wall Street Journal showed up, and it was amazing. And we sat down, and Rick Perry looked at Gavin Newsom and said, Gavin, you can't be for jobs and against business. It doesn't work. And he says, if you will just grow the economy, in California, 80% of your problems will disappear. And he was right. And the reason I took him to Texas is because Texas created 180,000 jobs and California lost 1.2 million. It was a tale of 2 states, but it was a perfect comparison. So the challenge is before us today. I'm not here. I'm 62 years old, and I don't need to be running for office just because I feel like doing it. I'm running for office because when my father passed away, who landed at Normandy, the last thing he told me was this. And he marched across Europe with General Patton. He said, Dan, do me one favor. Fight to give the freedom to your children that we fought to give you. He says, I'm throwing down the gauntlet today. We kept the faith, we fought the fight, and we prevailed. Now it's your turn. I do not want to look at my child and watch an Obama world take her soul. I won't stand by and let it happen. We're going to win this term. And I want to wrap up with a quote from a gentleman named Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Do you remember him? A great man. You know, this is what he told the Harvard graduating class in 1979 about freedom in America. This is what he said to those kids at that school. He said, Harvard's motto is Veritas. And he said, many of you have already found out, and others will find out in the course of their lives, that truth eludes us if we do not concentrate with total attention on its pursuit. And even while it eludes us, the illusion still lingers of knowing it, and it leads many astray. Truth is seldom pleasant. It's almost always bitter. He said, there's some bitterness in my speech today, but I come as a friend, not an adversary. And he said, there's three things that will cause the fall of our country. The first one is the decline in courage. Being prepared to take the fight. Being so afraid of losing that we've forgotten how to win. And this is what he said about it. It may be the most striking feature in America as you observe that America has lost its civil courage. Should one point out that from ancient times the decline in courage has been considered the beginning of the end. We have to take our country back. The second thing was, listen to this, fashionable thinking, bubblegum politics, the latest fad, cap and trade, all right, Congressman McClintock? AB 32. That's fashionable thinking. It has nothing to do with the truth or facts, but what's fashionable, and we've allowed that to happen. And in number 3, he talked about the loss of willpower to see freedom survive in the Western world. Those are the 3 battlegrounds that we have to face, and it's our turn to take the fight. Thomas Jefferson once wrote a letter to a gentleman named Alexander Carrington, and I want to read a quote from him to Alexander Carrington. And listen, please listen to this. He said, cherish therefore the spirit of our people and keep alive their attention. If once they become inattentive to the public affairs, you and I in Congress shall become wolves. It seems to be the law of our general nature. Thomas Jefferson to Edward Carrington. Edward Carrington helped write the Constitution of the United States. If we lose the attention of the people, we become as wolves. And isn't that what's happening in America today? And we're going to take our country back. So I'm here to pledge to you, from the day I was sworn in, I have taken the fight to regulatory agencies throughout the state. We've taken on CARB in one. We've taken on Consumer Affairs in one. We've taken on the Department of Water Resources in one. We've gone after battle, protecting the people of the district, knowing that we're there because we are your last line of hope. And I want you to know we're going to win this fight against Mr. Garamendi, who wrapped his arms around Obamacare with both arms. And he's labeled himself as the carrier for that, who's voted to the left of Pelosi. He got away with a lot before. We're going to show his record for what it is. This is a man who believes in growing the economy and taking away money from people who grow the economy themselves. So I'm here to pledge to you that, like our founding fathers, Patrick Henry. And he said, I hear the clanging of the chains in the fields of Massachusetts. That's what I hear today. But we're going to silence those chains. They're not going to be forged for this generation. And we'll be able to look at our children. And I just want to wrap it up by saying I took my daughter to a senior citizen center one time, and I stopped her and I said, I want you to look around. We met a World War II veteran named Ted Dress, a Marine. She said, why do you want me to look at these people? And I said, I want you to remember the twilight of a great generation, because everything that we have, they gave to us. And she looked at me and she goes, you're right. And she says, I'll never forget that. And I told her, I says, I won't either. So I want to thank you for what you've done here tonight. You made a difference in people's lives. And people throughout the world, ladies and gentlemen, are holding their breath that love freedom. And they are citizens of America, not because they live here, but because they love liberty, as you do. Think of that. 1,000 years from now, they're going to look at this country and say it was the finest hour for mankind. I don't want to lose this freedom under our watch. God bless you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman. Appreciate it. Ruben Barrales is president of Grow Elect, a political committee focused on expanding the Republican Party in California. Barrales most recently served as the president and chief executive officer of the San Diego Regional Chamber of Commerce. He also served as deputy assistant to President George W. Bush and director of White House Intergovernmental Affairs. He was the president's senior representative to the nation's governors, legislatures, mayors, and other elected officials. He served on the President's National Energy Policy Development Group and served as the chairman of the President's Task Force on Puerto Rico's status. In 1982, Mr. Barrales became the first Latino elected to the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors. He was re-elected and became president of the Board of Supervisors in 1996. Mr. Barrales, Hispanic Business Magazine has listed Mr. Barrales as one of the 100 most influential Hispanics in the United States 3 times. That's pretty amazing. Mr. Barrales and his wife Kelly have 2 children. Ruben Barrales.
Thank you very much. Yes, we do. And we're about to be empty nesters, so that's a new adventure for us. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me over. I want to say what a pleasure it is to be here at Jelly Belly. And Herm Roland, thank you so much for opening up your facilities here tonight and all that you do for not just the Republican Party, but for freedom in America. Thank you so much for your support. Is amazing, not just because as a businessman he doesn't have to do this. He doesn't have to be involved and support the causes that he supports and the candidates that he supports, but he does because, like those of you in this room, he cares about the direction of the state and the direction of the country. And that's what I want to talk to you about, a little piece of what I'm trying to do. I've, despite my very young looks, have been around a little bit in California politics and at the national level, and have dedicated myself to trying to do something where I feel I can make a difference, not just for the Republican Party, but for liberty and conservative values in America, for free enterprise, and just trying to move the country in a direction where I think it should be going, and I think a lot of us believe it should be moving. But before I get into that, I do also want to acknowledge, Assemblyman Logue I want to acknowledge our elected officials who are here. Assemblyman Logue, and who just spoke with us, Senator Jim Nilsen, who is a fantastic leader in Northern California for so many years. He's been fantastic. Tim McClintock, our congressman we'll hear from, and Tim Donnelly, Assemblyman from Southern California, who's here with us as well. All Republicans in the fight in Washington and Sacramento. I'm here because I believe that the Republican Party can grow, can be strengthened. And again, more importantly, not just because of the party. I love the Republican Party, but I'm not a Republican because I love the party. I'm a Republican because I love this country. And again, I want to see it grow. My experience is of the son of Mexican immigrants. My dad and my mom are both Mexican immigrants. My dad was part of the Bracero program. Back during World War II, my dad was a young man. He came from a family of 11, grew up on a ranch outside of Mexico City. He didn't have a lot of opportunity, so he took the opportunity to come to this country, and he worked in the Bracero program. He worked on the railroad lines up and down California, and he fell in love with Northern California. So he went back, after the program ended, he went back to Mexico, married, as the tradition, or I guess custom, a very young Mexican girl, and they drove back in his brand new Chevy through San Diego and up through, Chevrolet, he bought a Chevy with the money he earned, and drove back up. He fell in love, he loved San Francisco, he loved the Bay Area, settled on the San Francisco Peninsula in Redwood City, and he started a new life there. And that's where myself and my brother and my sister, that we were born and grew up. And I had the honor of being a roofer's son. So during summers, I got to mop hot tar or nail shingles and shakes. To add to my, as for a young kid growing up in the Bay Area, to add to that misery, my mom worked in candy factories. Back when Silicon Valley was the Valley of Heart's Delight, there were a lot of canning factories. She worked in those factories, and eventually she ended up owning a small coffee shop. So I got to either mop hot tar or wash dishes on weekends and summers, and taught me the value of hard work. And to me, my parents are my American heroes. I mean, they came to this country. They did not speak English. My dad, he didn't go past the 3rd grade, but growing up, he always had the afternoon newspaper, and he was always reading because he wanted to know what was happening. And he was a lifelong Democrat, and he always voted Republican. He was conservative. He loved Richard Nixon. He loved Ronald Reagan. He was a practical man. I was, for me, it was an honor to grow up in that household. Living really where Spanish was my first language. Where we were in Redwood City, if you're familiar with the peninsula. We were one of the first Mexican families in that neighborhood, and now probably 90% Hispanic in that neighborhood. And I, of course, being a good Mexican kid, grew up as a Democrat. I was a Democrat, and until I learned about economics and about freedom and about how to make things work. And I said, what's happening here? And I ran for county supervisor in San Mateo in 1992 at the ripe old age of 29, and I ran as a Republican because our county was dominated by Democrats. And if you came to my neighborhood, in my district included East Palo Alto and Menlo Park and East Menlo Park and Redwood City, our streets were miserable. On Middlefield Road, there were murders every couple of weeks. Somebody was getting murdered. I mean, I thought, okay, if this is what Democrat control means, I'm going to try an alternative. I think competition works in economics. I think competition can work in politics. So I ran for county supervisor, and I won that race with 50.1% of the vote. And it showed to me that every single vote, that was one vote per precinct that actually made the difference there. And we worked really hard. But I had a group of Republicans that was supportive of my campaign, and there's no way I could have done that without them. And I want to talk to you about what I'm doing, which is bringing together a group of Republicans to help Republicans get elected. But I was honored to be elected. I love being a county supervisor, and for me, what really made it worth it is I worked on a number of different issues. Myself and some of my colleagues started one of the first charter schools in the state. The state law had changed in the early 90s, so I went back to my old elementary school, 98% Hispanic, and said, let's make this a charter and give the parents an opportunity to control their own destiny. It was tough. And, I know we've got politicians in the room and folks. The toughest politics I've ever faced is a local school site. There's nothing tougher because the emotions are so raw and people's, wanting to control little things there. I learned how tough education reform is, really. But I also learned that you've got to stand up if you're going to make a difference. And then in East Palo Alto, some of you might be aware, in 1992, the FBI labeled East Palo Alto as the per capita murder capital of the U.S. 3 miles from the center of Stanford campus, and there was about a murder every single week in this very small town. Unacceptable. So working with our sheriff and others, CHP, we were able to really clamp down on that and make East Palo Alto safe. And what I was trying to get to is the two highlights of my elected career were when I got a call from a mom with a kid at Garfield Elementary School, which we turned into a charter, and she said, you know what, this is fantastic. It's like sending my child to a private school. We actually have an opportunity to give my child a quality education. And then when I got the call, my staff got a call from a constituent, a Spanish-speaking constituent in East Palo Alto, who called just to say thank you. I can take my children to the park now without having to worry. And to me, as a local elected official, just being able to make a difference at that level meant so much to me, and I was really proud to do that. I had the opportunity then, after President Bush was elected, probably haven't flown on Air Force One as much as Herm has, but I've been, I worked for President Bush in the White House, and that was an incredible experience.
Never flown the airplane.
Well, I highly recommend it. I had a chance to do that serving for president. But I'll tell you what I loved about George W. Bush, and people have different opinions and all. President Bush talked about issues, and I'm talking here specifically in the Latino community. He talked about issues that they cared about, that they could relate to. He talked about education reform, and people have different opinions about No Child Left Behind. But what he talked about as a Republican was caring about the education outcomes for minority kids, for black kids, for Latino kids, for poor kids, and saying, we have got to do something about it. And he had a plan to do something about it. And I think we as Republicans need to look at education reform and talk about what we're going to do about it to improve the quality of education for these kids. And if you look at our schools, public schools today, they're mainly Latino and African American and poor kids that are in our public schools. We need to do something about it. And he talked about immigration reform. And we can get into a whole debate about immigration reform. But here's my key. I don't care what, as Republicans, I want to support a Republican platform. I want to support a Republican approach to immigration reform. But whatever we do as Republicans, my only request is let's talk about it in a way that shows an appreciation for immigration and immigrants, having made this country the greatest country in the world. And so, whatever your position is, the details are less important. Well, the details are important. So details are really important. But I think our rhetoric is important too. So I think the way we talk about it and understanding why do people sacrifice their lives, why do they leave their families behind to come here legally or illegally, because they understand what America has to offer. We need to understand that we are that city on that city on the hill for so many. So let's get an immigration system that works for America, that works for us economically and culturally and all that. But let's do it in a way when we talk about it with an appreciation for why people come here. And I think that would make a tremendous difference. And so what I'm doing now, having had the honor of serving the President in the White House and seeing up close what it's like when you actually have control and you can move things, and I highly recommend that versus the state of what we're in today. So I want to get us back to being in control in the White House and in Congress and in Sacramento. So the one area where I think I can make a difference is in trying to reach into the Latino community, and what we're doing with Grow Elect, which is this group that I'm running now, is identifying, recruiting, and helping to elect Hispanic Republicans to office in California. And what we're trying to do, and the emphasis is on Republicans. We're looking for those who are willing to say, I'm Republican and I'm Hispanic and I'm willing to put my neck out on the line and run. And we're looking at all levels of government, but we're starting at the very basic. Special districts, school boards, city councils. We want to help build the Republican bench in California, and we want it to look like California. And I'm not talking about moderating what we believe in. I'm not talking about, okay, well, let's not be as conservative as we are. I'm saying let's find conservative Latinos and let's get them elected so they can be our messengers in the Latino community. Because the one thing I'm convinced, having done a couple decades of Latino outreach in California, is that doesn't work. I am done with outreach. What I think we need to do is inclusion. Outreach to me means, we're coming in tonight to see you and let you know how great we are, and that's outreach. What we need to do is inclusion, and I don't know a better way to include people than to support them. When I won my race for county supervisor, it was because there was a group, the Lincoln Club of Northern California, was on the peninsula there, and they were very supportive of me. Without their help, there's no way I could have won. And what I want to do is emulate that kind of model and say, there's a group. If you're familiar with a woman, a Latina, maybe who has children in the school, or a Latino who's interested in what's happening on the water at the water district or or your city council, and you think, they might be interested, or they should think about running for office. Let us know about it. Because we at Grow Elect, what I do, I wake up every morning and I try to figure out how can I get more Republicans elected. Republicans that happen to be Latino, but we want to grow the party. So that's what we're doing, and I know, and I've got to give a hand to Don Preston, your chairman, because I know this is a priority for him, and he understands. Peter Drucker talks about the future that's already happened in management. You look at what's happening in your environment, in business or in politics, and get there, because you know you've got to get there. There was an earthquake. Did anyone feel the earthquake on July 1st, which was a couple Mondays ago? Did you feel that earthquake? That was a demographic earthquake. That's the day in California that Latinos reached parity with whites in our state. Starting this month, moving forward, Latinos are going to be the single largest ethnic group in California. And so we as a party, I'm sure Herm does it. We know Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies do it. They look at demographics and say, where are things headed? And we have to do that. So as a party, I believe we need to do that. Not just to win, because winning is important, but to win so that we can govern, so that we can move this country in the direction that I know that my dad, who passed away, who's my American hero, I know he would want to see it move in. And that's fighting for liberty and the pursuit of happiness for all. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for doing this.
All right, before we move on, I want to talk to somebody. I didn't get to eat, so I really, really, really hope that someone back there is going to pack me a to-go box, because I will be eating this in bed tonight. I want salad, I want the dinner, and I want the dessert. And my dear friend the deacon over here slapped my wrist when I tried to take his jelly beans.
Don't give her any more jelly beans.
I need jelly beans.
No more.
All right,
With a jelly bean in her hand.
he really, I've got a bruise on my wrist. He's serious about this. I'm just kidding. Our keynote speaker tonight, Congressman Tom McClintock, was elected in November 2008 to represent the 4th Congressional District in the United States Congress. During 22 years in the California State Legislature and as a candidate for governor in California's historic recall election, Tom McClintock has become one of the most recognizable political leaders in California. First elected to the California Assembly at the age of 26, McClintock served in the Assembly from 1982 to 1992 and again from 96 to 2000. During these years, he spearheaded the campaign to rebate $1.1 billion in tax over-collections to the people of California. And he became the driving force in the legislature to abolish the car tax. Thank you. In 2000, McClintock was elected to the California State Senate, where he developed innovative budget solutions such as the Bureaucracy Reduction and Closure Commission and performance-based budgeting, and advocated for restoring California's public works. From 92 to 94, McClintock served as director of the Center for the California Taxpayer, a project of the National Tax Limitation Foundation. In 95, he was named Director of Economic and Regulatory Affairs for the Claremont Institute's Golden State Center for Policy Studies. In that capacity, he wrote and lectured extensively on state fiscal policy, privatization, bureaucratic reform, and governmental streamlining. McClintock is the chairman of the Water and Power Subcommittee of the House Natural Resources Committee and is a member of the Budget Committee and the Natural Resources Committee. That's a lot of committees. How do you sleep? He is also a member of the Subcommittee on National Parks, Forests, and Public Lands. Tom McClintock and his wife, Lori, who is my new friend in Sugar Land, have 2 children. And on a personal level, I've got to say this. PolitiChicks has around a couple of 100,000 followers. I'm pretty savvy in social networking. I've got a couple of Facebook friends here today. I hear a lot about politicians, and a lot of people don't like politicians at all here in America. I don't know if that's a surprise for you, Republicans or not, but and I've interviewed a lot of politicians across the United States. I can tell you right here, truthfully, behind my American flag, I have never heard one bad thing about Congressman McClintock, and that doesn't happen. So kudos and thank you for what you do for this state and this country.
And Marie, that's very kind of you to say, but if that's the case, you need to get out more. I can't thank you enough for the invitation to join you tonight.
Can't hear you, Tom.
How's that? There we go. I just cannot begin to thank each and every one of you for the invitation to be here tonight and for the work that you were doing on behalf of those principles that have animated and directed our party since its foundation. And you struck upon the very core of those principles in naming tonight's dinner, the Liberty Ball, in a single word that defines all that our party stands for and everything that's at stake in this great debate now going on over the future direction of our country. And it comes down to whether those uniquely American principles set forth in the American Declaration of Independence and set in motion by our American Constitution will continue to guide our nation and protect its freedom in the days ahead. And when Lincoln made his way to Washington, the inaugural train on the second day stopped at Independence Hall in Philadelphia, where Lincoln laid out his entire political philosophy and that of the Republican Party with these words. He said, "All the political sentiments I entertain have been drawn so far as I have been able to draw them from the sentiments which originated in and were given to the world from this hall. I have never had a feeling politically that did not spring from the sentiments embodied in the Declaration of Independence." It is, after all, those sentiments that made the revolution, well, revolutionary. It was the principle that there's a certain class of rights that predate government, that each of us is born with. And if they predate government, they cannot come from government. Rather, we create governments to protect those rights. This was a treasonous concept to European sensibilities. In the European view, to this very day, our rights come from government. The French revolutionaries, who tried to imitate the American Revolution, missed the very essence of it. As de Tocqueville noted during his travels, the French believed their rights came from the Committee on the Rights of Man. And they discovered to their horror that if rights are granted to us by our government, then those same rights can be withdrawn by that very same government. The Americans, he said, believe something fundamentally different. The Americans believe that their rights come from God and that no earthly power can legitimately take them away. He said, do the Americans believe in God? He says, I don't know. I can't look into the hearts of men, but I know this. The Americans believe that this concept is absolutely essential to the preservation of their liberty. And it was this uniquely American view of the nature of human rights that created this voluntary society. Jefferson summed it up best in his first inaugural address. After he noted the bountiful blessings that the nation enjoyed, he asked this question: with all these blessings, what more is necessary to make us a happy and prosperous people? Still one thing more, fellow citizens, a wise and frugal government, which shall restrain men from injuring one another, shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned. This is the sum of good government, and this is necessary to close the circle of our felicities. Abraham Lincoln put it this way during his last debate with Stephen Douglas in 1858. He said, that is the real question. That is the question that will continue in this nation when these poor tongues of Judge Douglas and I shall be silent. He said, it is the eternal struggle between these two principles, right and wrong, throughout the world. They are the same two principles that have stood face to face from the beginning of time, and will ever continue to struggle. The one is the common right of humanity. and the other is the divine right of kings. It is the same principle in whatever shape it develops itself. It is the same spirit that says, you work and toil and make bread, and I will eat it. No matter what shape it comes, whether from the mouth of a king who seeks to bestride the people of his nation and live by the fruit of their labor, or from one race of men as an apology for enslaving another race, it is the same tyrannical principle. And that is the great debate that we are having again today between the divine right of kings and the common right of humanity, between the voluntary society of free men and women and the compulsory society where the state is the supreme director of our fate. In these compulsory societies, the compulsory societies that we broke away from, the sovereign sets the direction of society, it allocates the resources, assigns the rights, and makes the decisions of how society is to move to achieve them. In both societies, voluntary and compulsory, government is very important, but for two very different reasons. The voluntary society is one directed by the individual decisions of free citizens as they chart their own paths through life. The government guards the conditions necessary for them to do so, as Jefferson said, restraining men from injuring one another. The voluntary society's government provides the stable currency. It provides the sanctity of contracts and the security of property that makes human exchange possible. It shields the commons, and it provides for the common defense, and it superintends the basic infrastructure upon which human civilization depends. Within this very simple, defined, and limited framework, individuals make their own decisions over how to allocate their time and resources and how to live their own lives. The sum total of their individual choices, made hundreds of times a day, is what defines the path of that voluntary society, of which government is an obedient servant. At the very practical level, this means that we decide for ourselves where we wish to live, what we wish to eat, what light bulbs we prefer, how high we'll set our thermostats, how we'll get to work, how much water we'll put in our toilets. And we vote every day with every dollar we spend on what those priorities will be. The compulsory society is something very different. It needs government to compel individuals to act in a manner that subordinates their individual hopes and aspirations to the collective designs of the state. All for the greater good, of course, we're constantly reassured. And that requires great heaping gobs of government, because it's not easy to force people to act against their own interests, their own moral principles, and their own best judgment. That takes force, a lot of force, and a lot of bureaucrats to micromanage every facet of our daily lives. Now, the American people have received a clear sampling of what a compulsory society looks like over these past 5 years, and particularly over these past few months. In the compulsory society, government, not individual consumers, picks the winners and losers in the marketplace. In this society, bankers or industrialists who share government's favor are bailed out by hardworking taxpayers with the excuse, well, we're all in this together. Companies like Solyndra that cannot earn the trust of consumers through their own merit force consumers to buy their products or underwrite their losses with the excuse that government must guide the economy. Under the banner of sustainable communities, government will encourage and threaten and, if need be, force all of us to live in dense urban cores and conserve every drop of water and every watt of electricity. We're told that such a compulsory society merely reclaims American values. Let there be no mistake. The advocates of this society are not reclaiming American values. They are fundamentally rejecting them and replacing them with values alien and antithetical to those which built our nation.
compulsory society needs government to restrain individuals from acting in a manner that violates the natural rights of others. The compulsory society needs government to compel individuals to act in a manner that comports with the vision of government, even at the expense of the natural rights of others. The compulsory society needs government to allocate resources. The voluntary society needs government to protect individuals as they allocate resources themselves. The compulsory society needs government to indoctrinate and inculcate every individual with a common vision of society. The voluntary society needs government to protect the freedom of speech that allows a robust and constant testing of ideas. In short, a compulsory society disdains constitutional constraints on government and the free choices by individuals. A voluntary society insists on them. Now, 2 months ago, the President addressed students at Ohio State University, in which he extolled the benign virtues of an all-powerful government and told the students to ignore those who warn of its dangers. Just a week later, Americans awoke to learn that over the last several years, that government has employed one of the most powerful and feared agencies to harass ordinary Americans because of their political beliefs, with the clear intention of intimidating them into withdrawing from exercising their right to participate in the public policy debate. We know that nearly 500 conservative groups involving tens of thousands of individual Americans were subjected to invasive review and intimidation when they attempted to file for 501c status. It's the very same status, by the way, that is routinely granted for such advocacy groups as MoveOn.org, the ACLU, or the League of Conservation Voters. The IRS demanded the names of every participant at every meeting these groups held over a period of years. Transcripts of every speech given at those meetings, what positions they'd taken on issues, the names of their volunteers and donors, the names of their families and associates, and copies of privileged communications they had with elected officials. In some cases, the person filing the request was then subjected to a personal income tax audit. The Venerable Leadership Institute, which has been schooling young people in constitutional principles for 40 years, was put through a year-long audit. The IRS wasn't only interested in financial information, it wanted the names of their students and their college interns and the names of anyone who had subsequently hired them. And when the IRS wasn't demanding the names of ordinary Americans, or what they were reading or thinking or saying or even praying, in some cases applicants were given names and told to reveal what they knew about these people. Now, a week after the IRS scandal broke, Americans awakened to news that the Justice Department had surreptitiously seized the telephone records of some 20 reporters covering Washington for the Associated Press in an obvious attempt to discourage whistleblowers from talking to them. And then Fox News reporter James Rosen and his family were stalked by authorities as he tried to get to the bottom of the Benghazi scandal. Now, in order to do so, the Attorney General of the United States filed an absolutely spurious claim with the federal court, charging that Rosen was conspiring to violate the Espionage Act. That's the same act under which the Rosenbergs were executed in 1953. The message to reporters asking inconvenient questions of this administration could not possibly have been more powerful or more terrifying. And then last month, Americans awakened to news that the federal government had swept up the phone and internet records of hundreds of millions of Americans in the name of state security. Now, these are the same kind of indiscriminate searches conducted by British authorities 250 years ago that John Adams said gave birth to the fight for American independence. The founders specifically wrote the Fourth Amendment to assure that indiscriminate government searches never again happened in America. In America, in order for the government to invade your privacy or to go through your personal records or property, it must first present some evidence that justifies its suspicion against you and then specify what records or things it is looking for. And then over the past 2 weeks, this administration has again asserted that the President has the legal authority to nullify any law that he deems objectionable or inconvenient simply by refusing to faithfully execute those laws, and to impose new laws through the regulatory bureaucracies, laws that the elected Congress has specifically refused to enact. Ladies and gentlemen, we are seeing a pattern of conduct throughout this regime that is absolutely toxic to a free society. Government using its powers to intimidate private citizens who are simply trying to take part in the public policy debate. Government using its powers to intimidate reporters from the operation of a free press. Government seizing and monitoring the phone and internet records of every American. And government asserting powers it is explicitly forbidden by our Constitution. And let us never forget Ronald Reagan's words. The Constitution is not the government's document telling us what we can and cannot do. The Constitution is the people's document in which we tell our government those things that we will allow it to do. Last month, on national television, the President's spokesman said that, quote, the law is irrelevant. He called these matters a, quote, distraction. Well, what does that say about a society that once prided itself as being a nation of laws and not of men? You know, ever since we lost Ronald Reagan, we've been slowly and inexorably losing the debate over the proper size and role of government. Whether we would remain a voluntary society as envisioned by America's founders, or become a compulsory one representing the very regimes that we broke with so many years ago. Well, that might be starting to change now as Americans begin to consider the implication of all of these developments over these past few months. You know, ours wouldn't be the first civilization to succumb to this siren song of a benevolent and all-powerful government. But without a single exception, history warns us that every civilization that has fallen for that lie has awakened one morning to realize that the benevolence is gone and that the all-powerful government is still there. In the next several months, the House will be laying out the facts for the American people to judge. Each one of us needs to do everything we can to engage our friends and neighbors and awaken them to the danger that we face from these developments. Because I fear that if we allow these usurpations to go unchallenged, simply ignore them and go about our daily affairs, a very bright line will have been crossed, and the recovery of our liberty will become infinitely more difficult from there. And like it or not, the Republican Party is the only organized political movement that now stands in the way of an administration that is taking us away from a nation of laws and toward a nation where the laws are, quote, irrelevant. An administration that's taking us away from a voluntary society and toward a compulsory one. You know, the American founders often referred to a liberty tree. In fact, one of the Revolutionary War flags is emblazoned with that liberty tree. Our generation didn't plant that tree. We didn't grow that tree. We were simply handed it by 8 generations of Americans who came before us. We accepted it and all its blessings with the solemn obligation to care for it, to protect it, and to nurture it so that it continues to bear the fruit of liberty for the generations who follow ours. And those fruits include the First Amendment that guarantees all Americans the right to our political and religious beliefs and the right to express those beliefs freely without fear of government intimidation or retribution. The Second Amendment that guarantees us the means to protect our families and our freedoms. The Fourth Amendment, that forbids our government from seizing our personal records without probable cause to believe that we've actually committed a crime. The Fifth Amendment, that forbids our government from depriving us of our lives, our liberty, or our property without the due process of law. And the 10th Amendment, that reserves to the states and to the people all powers not explicitly granted it by our Constitution. As we leave here today, let us highly resolve not to rest until we are committed to deliver to our sons and daughters a liberty tree that is just as healthy, a Constitution that is just as strong, and a nation that is just as free as those that our fathers and mothers gave to us. As Daniel Webster said so long ago, hold fast, my friends, to the Constitution and to the Republic for which it stands. For miracles do not cluster. And what has happened once in 6,000 years may not happen again.
Amen.
Hold fast to the Constitution, for if the American Republic should ever fail, there will be chaos throughout the world.
We've got a little bit more time, so does anyone have a question they want to ask the Congressman?
Yes, I'd like to ask.
There we go.
Thank you, Mike. What a surprise. Yeah, there you go. I worked with the IRS, and I found them to be a very, very efficient organization when they were going after organized crime. I'm appalled that they've gone after regular Americans, because it is a terrifying process to have that happen. What's the Congress going to do? What are you going to do to stop them?
Well, a couple of observations. First of all, I think that this scandal is going to unravel a lot faster than Watergate, for example. In the case of Watergate, which was powerful people abusing the Constitution to attack other powerful people, this is powerful people abusing the Constitution to attack ordinary Americans. And unlike Watergate, where the facts were known to a very, very select few who were heavily invested in keeping them secret, the facts of what was going on throughout the IRS and other agencies, I have to believe, were known to hundreds, if not thousands, of other government employees, many of whom were disgusted by it but didn't know what to do. I think as they come forward, the facts are going to emerge very rapidly. There are 6 congressional committees looking into these scandals, and I believe that by the end of the summer we're going to have a very clear idea of what was going on. And that's absolutely critical. As far as what to do, we need to let the investigation take its course. The NTSB is very good at determining the cause of air crashes because of an ethic in which they refuse to jump to conclusions. They refuse to form opinions until they have laid out all the facts. The theory is that if you lay out all the facts, those facts will ultimately lead you to the appropriate conclusion. And that's what we need to allow to occur. But the facts that we do know are pretty chilling, and they suggest that this goes much farther than just the IRS. You remember the businessman Frank Vandersloot, whose sole crime was to support Mitt Romney in the election, came under a vicious personal attack by the Obama campaign, and yet within weeks was suddenly subjected not only to audits by the IRS, but audits of the Labor Department as well. The Competitive Enterprise Institute has laid out the fact that waivers for fees under the Freedom of Information Act were granted 93% of the time to left-wing groups, and exactly the opposite, about 7% of the time to conservative groups. So this is a pattern of conduct that appears right throughout the government, and all those facts need to be laid out. And we need to be attentive to them as they're being laid out and be sure that our friends and neighbors are aware of them and aware of their implications.
Yeah. AB 711. Apparently we just outlawed lead ammunition for hunting in the state of California. Or shooting in the state of California. It was very quiet. There was no fanfare. There was if you don't pay attention, you never would have known it happened. Is this really going to take place? I'm a shooter. I'm a hunter. I like long-distance shooting. I've never found a single round of non-lead ammo that will actually achieve an accurate pattern at long distance. Is this truly going to take place?
Well, again, that is a state enactment, and as I look at this state legislature and this governor, yes, I believe that it is going to take place. This is a warning to all of us. Abraham Lincoln was right when he said that the voters are everything. If the voters get their backsides too close to the fire, he said, they'll just have to sit on the blisters a while. It is a painful experience, but it is a learning experience, and people emerge from that sadder and wiser and in time for the next election. We were having this conversation at dinner. Those of us that remember what California once was, a generation ago in the 1960s, it really was the golden state. It was a land of opportunity, a land of freedom. We had the finest public school system in the country. We had the finest highway system in the world. We were providing a free university education to every Californian who wanted one. It was the land of opportunity, the land of plenty. Its unemployment rate was always much lower than the national unemployment rate. All of that has changed. And it's not because our state has been struck down by some mysterious act of God. These are all acts of government. And that's all within our power to change. We're watching, over the past decade, since the recall election, 2.3 million more Californians have moved out of California than have moved in. So, when they say, well, Republicans are losing elections, we're not losing elections in California. The problem is that Californians are now voting with their feet. The point is, we've got to tell this story to, as Ruben said, to constituencies that have never thought of themselves as Republicans, but who think as we think and believe as we believe. The American founders didn't call them self-evident truths for nothing. They are true to all peoples, in all parts of the world, in all times. We need to enunciate those principles again and to tie those principles to the policies that are destroying the freedom and prosperity of our state and of our country. And you've just mentioned one of many.
Another one. Okay, this is going to be the last one. You guys want to duke it out? All right. Thank you. Excuse me.
Thanks. I just wanted to make a comment. I have been involved a lot in writing opinions and reading opinions about what's happening in our country. And one of the things that I know for sure is that we're a hell of a lot better at commenting about it than we are doing anything about it. And the Declaration of Independence has given us instructions on what to do. It has said it is not only our duty, not only our right, but our duty and responsibility to throw off tyranny, tyrannical despotism. And I say again, it's our responsibility. And how many of us are taking that responsibility as opposed to just talking about it?
All right. Do you want to ask yours real quick?
I'm going to qualify this by telling you I am an immigrant to this country. I'm a U.S. citizen now. I know there's going to be people in this room not going to like what I have to say, but how do you feel about the immigration bill that's coming through Congress?
I can't go real fast. My skirt's too tight.
Well, we're told that we need a balanced approach, a path to citizenship, and then stricter enforcement of our immigration laws. We've heard this song before. That's precisely the parameters of the 1986 immigration law. The legalization of the then 3 million illegal immigrants in the country occurred immediately. We are still waiting for the enforcement of our existing immigration laws, and if we cannot trust the government to enforce our existing laws, how can we ever expect to believe the promise that in the future they will enforce even stricter laws? I don't buy that. The fact is, ours is a nation of immigrants. Every single one of us is either an immigrant ourselves or we're the sons or daughters of immigrants. There is only one way to build one great nation from all the nations of the world, which is what America is. And that's the process of assimilation, the process by which people come to this country with a sincere desire to become Americans, to acquire a common language, a common culture, and a common appreciation of American constitutional principles and American legal traditions. Our immigration laws were not written to keep people out. They were written to assure that as people come to America, they assimilate into America as Americans. Illegal immigration undermines that whole process of legal immigration that makes that process possible to begin with. And as to the path to citizenship, there is a path to citizenship. It is followed by millions of legal immigrants who are today obeying all of our laws, who are doing everything our country asks of them, including waiting patiently in line. They are respecting our nation's sovereignty, and they are watching 11 million people try and cut in line in front of them. That's my view of the immigration law. And let me close with this. Let me close with a response to the earlier comment. We're good at talking about things, but are we willing to act? Every one of you has answered that question by being here tonight. Every one of you has answered that question every day when you write a letter to the editor, when you call into talk shows, when you send an article to your friends that you think they need to see, when you leave a comment after a column or an editorial on the internet. Believe me, that is the only way to change society. All of the debates that go on in the United States Capitol or in state capitals across the country, they don't matter. They are simply a reflection of a much larger debate that's going on right now among the American people. That's the debate that matters. That's the debate that we have to win. That's the debate that will determine the course of our nation for generations to come. Every one of us needs to be a part of that debate. And if we are, we will see these issues resolved, and we will see the founding principles of our country restored, and our nation will begin its next great chapter of prosperity and influence around the world. I'll leave you with these words. I spoke of the second day of the inaugural train in Philadelphia. The night before, they stopped in Indianapolis. And Lincoln that night went out on the train platform and addressed a crowd that had gathered. And he told them something. And remember, he's going to Washington to confront the greatest crisis our nation had yet faced, basically the completion of the American Revolution and all the promises of the American founding. And he told the group that night words that are just as important to us today. He said, of the American people, it may be said, when they stand united in defense of their union and its liberties, the gates of hell shall not prevail against them. I appeal to you, fellow citizens, constantly to bear in mind that not with the President, not with the office holders, but with you is the question. Shall the liberties of our nation be preserved to the latest generation? You've answered that question. Thank you.
Well, I think is the silent auction over now? What happened here? I think 9:05 is what time it was over. Get out there. Y'all better get out there. Does anybody else want to check on auction